the CTO and co-founder at Tethras. We're an app localization company. We started 2.5 years ago specifically to deliver localization services to app developers. So what I want to do is share with you the insights that we've learned and the processes that we've developed and some of the tools that we've developed, and also to get inside the mind of the developer to explain what these app developers are as we see it. I live in Silicon Valley in California, so I'm in the middle of a lot of this app development and go to a lot of meetups. So we've built our business around their needs and how they work and how they think. So I want to share that with you today. A little bit about myself and background. I've been internationalizing and localizing software for over 20 years. So I started my career at Clavin, subsidiary of Apple in Dublin, back in 1990, and localized some of their products, and then moved to Silicon Valley and did the first version of ClarisWorks for Japan. An Irishman in Silicon Valley developing products for Japan who doesn't speak a word of Japanese, but careers take interesting turns and twists. So I've been working in the sort of client side, building their processes and tools for localization for 20 years. Before I started this company 2.5 years ago, I worked at Google. So I was responsible for all the infrastructure at Google that allows them to get their products into the hands of the non-English speaking consumers of the world. Some of you as LSPs or MLVs may have worked with some of the Google products and worked with the localization team. My team was sort of on the infrastructure side, making the engineering team at Google, I'm talking here about 6,000-7,000 engineers, and 2,000 of them building front ends, making them efficient in terms of how they build their products and get them localized. And that's what I've tried to do. We've tried to do with this company is deliver that same experience of efficiency to the mobile app developers. Okay, so state some of the obvious things here, but things have changed over the last number of years in terms of how technology, software is distributed and so on. And how many of you remember the brick? And that was a cool thing to have, 20 years ago, if you had one of them, you carried around, and so on. And then, things got smaller. I think this was the smallest Motorola phone that came about, and today we're all using smartphones and so on, which have gotten a little bigger, and the screens have gotten a little bigger. But miniaturization, definitely. Who remembers this? Did everyone in the room have one of these? Powerful. One tape, 60 minutes of music, you were made, okay? And Sony were the leaders in this space, and we all know what happened to that and what we're using today. And we're using the iPod Nano, and it's got 10,000 songs or whatever. Great marketing genius that Steve Jobs brought to this by putting all that music onto these devices. And if you think about it, he was telling you that if you've got your music collection, you can rip your CDs and carry it around with you. But if you've never owned a CD, and I think this generation don't own CDs and LPs, you can buy 10,000 songs from me and give me $10,000 in revenue at 99 cents a piece. So it was quite interesting how that changed how we listen to music, and as I'll speak to later, how apps came about and how we consume software. And who remembers this, flipping through LPs at the store? I can see everybody here relates to this. If it was at a developer meetup, they go, "What's an LP?" Right? But we've changed our buying habits and how we consume things. And today, a lot of us are buying our music from iTunes, right? We buy it online. We buy it on our devices. We don't have any physical media anymore. And I think this has contributed to, and I'll speak to this in a little bit, the explosion of apps in the App Store and how we now consume apps and software. But Steve Jobs, to his team, when they built the iTunes Store and built the iPod, his remit to them was, make it easier for people to get music, to buy music from us and get it onto the device, than it would be to copy it from a pirate site and put it onto a device. He said, they will come if you make it easier. They will pay us 99 cents per song. And he was right. And it's all about convenience, and it's all about, I want it and I want it now. I decided to throw this one in here. Who remembers this? The luggable, right? Did you have one? This was Apple doesn't get everything right. This was their first portable computer. I think it weighed 10 pounds or something. It broke your knee if you had it sitting on your lap. Right? It was the laptop knee breaker, and it didn't even fit in a standard airplane seat. You had to have it above the. So they haven't got it right all along, and now we have the iPad, the MacBook Air, and the smallest computer out there, or was at the time. So now. When was the last time you went into a store and browsed to buy software, right? We buy our software now on Amazon. We download it directly from the distributors. The whole distribution model has changed. And here we're looking at the Macintosh App Store. So Macintosh users will recognize this. This is where now most people are buying their software for their Macs. If you notice down on the bottom right-hand side, the top paid selling app is now Mountain Lion, the operating system. So they don't ship CDs anymore. You don't go in and buy it off a shelf. You buy it on the computer, and they've made it so efficient that it'll update. And so the whole thing has changed in terms of distribution of software. And really, this is what's the genesis of this explosion in apps and smartphone devices. And this is the iTunes App Store where people buy apps. And that's what I'm going to talk about, the developers that are developing these apps, how they develop them, how they think, and why they should localize, and the barriers to localization, and so on. So let's take a look at the app developer, okay? And again, this is from our experience working with these customers, attending meetups, knowing these people who develop these apps. And so let's take a look at the profile of a typical app developer. First of all, most of them are independent, right? The original iPhone and the software that came in was developed by Apple. They didn't even have a notion of having an app store and letting developers develop third-party software for this. Okay, and then very quickly they realized that they needed to open it up, that people wanted to develop software for this. And the rest is history. The explosion has been phenomenal over the last 3.5 years. But a lot of them are independents, or at least start out as independent developers. A lot of them are hobbyists who decide, they're working for IBM, they're working for Apple, they're working for whoever. And they download these SDKs and they build these apps and they put them out there. Suddenly they got a hit in their hands, and suddenly they're a small business owner, and suddenly they're probably a big business. Right? And I'll talk a little bit about that. And they are entrepreneurial in spirit, right? I think it started as a hobbyist, a lot of them, but now they've left their jobs, and some of them are successful. Some of them have gone away. I mean, there's 200,000 apps that you can't download anymore in the App Store because they were no good. So they are entrepreneurial in spirit. App developers tend to go to meetups. They don't tend to go to conferences. They go to meetups to meet their buddies, to talk about the latest technology, to listen to people talking. And in the valley, in Silicon Valley where I am, that's where you meet all the app developers. I've been at some localization conferences over there that are geared towards app developers. They don't show up. They don't want to take 2 days out of their schedule. They want to come to a meetup at 6 in the evening, get a beer, some pizza, talk to their friends, tweet about it, and so on. And that's where you meet a lot of these app developers at meetups. They're cafe coders, right? I don't know if you're familiar with the phrase, but guys are working in Starbucks, right? They get out of they're working at home, and they go and they work in cafe in the States, and in Silicon Valley, Wi-Fi is free at Starbucks, Pete's. That's where you find them. They're all working there. I used to think they were just people browsing when I started this business, because I spend all my day, in an office working for Google. But when I started this company, then I'd go out and I'd sit and I'd see guys say, oh, they're reading blogs or whatever, and then I realized, no, that guy's got Xcode open. He's building an app, right? Or he's got Eclipse running, and he's building an Android app, and he's got his device and he's plugged it in, and he's working. He spends 2 or 3 hours there with free Wi-Fi. They're pretty much always online. Okay, these developers are sitting here in front of their computer in their development environment, and they're sitting with their mobile phone over here, and they're watching tweets coming in. Most of them are ignoring email. They don't even use email anymore, right? They're tweeting with their friends and getting messages, and they might have certain times of the day that'll turn back and start using email. But they're sort of a different communication style. And they are early adopters of new tech. The success of the App Store is evident of that. Guys that could download the SDK, figure it out quickly, start building apps and publish them. I'll talk a little bit about this in a while. The SDKs and the development environments that they work in are pretty standard. So it's very different to people that are putting together websites who might be using Java or PHP or whatever to build that site. And when it comes to localization, you have all the different file formats, and guys are doing stuff on the server and they're doing stuff on the client side. But within the app development world, it tends to be a little bit more structured, the formats that they deal with. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a while. Now, looking at the team profile, so we talk about independence, but we've seen over the last maybe 2 years that a lot of guys that had their own individual apps are now coming together and working together, either contracting for bigger companies who want to build apps, or they've got some momentum on their app, and now they start to form teams and come together. And what I'm showing here is that about 90% is a real long tail business. 90% of app developers work in teams of 5 or less. Okay, and they tend to all be app developers. who work on these small teams. So you don't get the typical, you know, there's a localization person, there's a project manager, right, that deals with localization. It's not. You're going to deal probably with the most technical person on that team, the guy who's developing the app, because he understands what needs to be done, or he's the one that's going to figure out what needs to be done for localization. So very different to traditional localization in terms of who you're dealing with and who the decision makers are with these apps when it comes to localization. Instagram. Who hasn't heard of Instagram? Okay. You haven't? Oh, you don't use it? Okay. But Instagram, you know, Facebook paid $1 billion for Instagram. That was a team of 12 people. I'll guarantee you that 12 of those guys were writing code, more than likely, or some of them were testing it. So just to kind of, the successes in the App Store and the success exit strategies for companies don't necessarily mean that you become a big corporation with 200 or 300 people and, you know, all the various functions of a software developer in place before you get an exit or $1 billion paycheck. So that was a team of, like, I think about 12 people when they bought them. Pixelmator. So this is one of the top grossing apps in the Mac App Store. Two guys, two brothers. They may have grown in the last year or so, but they built this app. It's like a competitor to Photoshop, really nice app. And two guys, right? That's because they're selling it in the Mac App Store. So they work in Xcode, they build it, they test it, they push a button and it gets uploaded to the Mac App Store and it's available worldwide. They don't have to call up their distributor, they don't have to press a CD, they don't have to print a manual, they don't have to put it into a box. So very, very different process for these people developing apps today. Now take a look at the Apple App Store as an example of one of the many app stores that are out there. So the App Store, I looked this up yesterday, there's 177,000 publishers on the App Store as of yesterday. 680,000 apps, and about 200,000 apps that have that are now not available. So almost 1 billion different apps produced by, you know, whatever, 177,000 publishers, and in teams of 5 or less. You can appreciate, you know, how many people are involved, or the small size of teams that are involved in producing these number of apps over the last 3.5 years. And according to the stats on Biz 148, 374 apps this month in the App Store. They've been submitting 374 apps a day. So these numbers are mind-boggling in terms of the amount of software that's being produced, the amount of downloads that are happening. And
updates, or
I think that includes updates, yeah. So I'll talk a little bit about that as well. I don't think there's 374 new apps, but there are updates that hit customers that they need to know what that update is and has it been localized. If they've localized to start, it's very hard to turn it off and not localize it anymore. So, okay, so a little bit about the SDKs and file formats. So it is really, really easy to get started as an app developer, right? If we had decent Wi-Fi here, I could download the SDK, build an app, and if I could build it in a day, I could submit it to Apple, and everything is contained within the Xcode development environment. So very, very easy for people to get started in this. Oh, software development kit. So software development kit is the set of tools, libraries, whatever it takes to go and build a piece of software. And so Apple has their SDK, which is called Xcode, which is what?
Free for the
yeah. Android, Google supplies an SDK for Android. You download it and you can run it either as command line tools or within Eclipse. So it's just how you build apps and code and press the button and get that binary that you're going to submit to one of the app stores. And they've made this super easy. I mean, Microsoft has done this for years. You've got Dev Studio, if you're familiar with the Microsoft, you know, ASP. But this thing is ginormous. I don't know if you can even download it from the internet. I think you got to get a number of DVDs to download and so on. But they have this one big, huge kitchen sink for developing all their different platforms, or different software for different platforms, be it server, Silverlight, Windows Phone 8, so on. And so tools now, there are people who've built tools on top of these SDKs to even make it easier to go and develop apps. So you have people that allow developers to come to an online set of tools, do some JavaScript and CSS, and produce an app that'll run on 3 different platforms. So lots of support for this growing community of app developers to get apps out there onto these smartphone devices. I talked a little bit about this already, standard formats. So within the Apple iOS Xcode development, there's a few formats that developers use to produce those apps. I think I'll talk about some of them here. They're called .strings files. XIB is a layout file. For Xcode or iOS apps,plists are just structured lists, XML, JSON, and HTML. For the most part, these are all structured formats that they adhere to. And it's pretty easy to parse these files and extract out the localizable content from them. HTML, some HTML within apps. It's not very common that people use this. There is a way of having HTML within a browser, within an app. But we have customers who have their own websites. And they'll want HTML translated, so we'll take that. But within the app itself, not a lot of HTML. And the websites for app developers tend to be pretty small because their marketing and their distribution and where the apps are discovered is within the App Store, the iTunes App Store. So they're not building these big commercial sites. It depends. I mean, you've got guys that have software offerings that are moving to mobile, and they've done a lot of stuff themselves within their sites. I wouldn't classify them as app developers. I would just say they're people who are developing apps to support their business and go out to a wider audience and make it easier for people to access their content and so on. And then multiple platforms. So what's happening is guys are developing apps for iPhone and a lot of the, for iOS, a lot of the money, the big paydays are within the iOS and Mac app stores, but they will do Android as well. And so you have them building apps within iOS, and then they'll go and do the Android version. They may do the Windows Phone version when that comes out, and some BlackBerry. But they essentially have the same app, but they have resources for the different SDKs. So they have essentially 3 or 4 different versions of the same app, and they need localization for that. And they sometimes will say, right, if I do the iOS, then I have half the translations in here. I'm going to copy and paste them over to the Android version, and then I only need to get what's new, and it's work for them. And one of the things, and I'll talk about this, we do leveraging across the different versions of the app. So if we do the iOS app first, then we'll leverage the translations into the Android and so on. And that's a lot of what app developers want. They want that sort of content management for their assets within the service provider that they're using for translation. Let's look at distribution. I talked a little bit about this. These are all of the different countries that are available on the App Store for apps, iOS apps. And there's about, I think, 130 countries right now that Apple provides, if you like, a storefront in those countries for those developers. So when a developer uploads his app that he wants to distribute, he ticks a box and says, distribute this worldwide. And that app will be available in every one of these country stores. So for those not familiar with iTunes and the app buying experience, when you sign up for an account, you're tied to one of these country stores. So then the user interface on that store is what you see on your phone or see on your computer when you log in. And everything is sort of marketed, or the use of that site is in that local language. So if you distribute an app in English, the description and everything will appear in English to that user. So if that's a user who doesn't speak English, he's not going to understand what your app does. He's not going to see, the marketing information for that app. And then if he downloads it, he's going to discover it's only available. The app only runs in English. So again, distribution has changed for app developers. They don't have to think about how do I get into, the French market? How do I get into the Japanese market? Who's my distributor over there? Do I have a country manager? The app stores make this easy for the developer to distribute worldwide. So again, the point here is I think that about 30% of these app stores, if you like, around the world are in English only. The rest are all in native languages for the iTunes. So distribution is sort of a breeze, if you like, because everyone thinks, oh, and a lot of app developers are like, everyone in the world speaks English, this is great. Right? And we all know that's not the case. That's why we're in this business. And so getting that message across to the app developers can be tricky. Okay. I'll talk a little bit about app updates. So the localization of the app itself is a matter of getting those resources translated, getting it tested, built into the app, and putting it out there, and then updates. So, app development is truly agile. These are small code bases in terms of the number of lines of code, small teams working on it, and lots of updates. And updates are done frequently. And I'll talk a little bit about why these updates are done frequently in a couple of slides. Updates are usually small, right? It might be a quick bug fix or a new feature, or making it compatible with the latest version of the operating system that the manufacturer has just released. And so usually small, as I said, new features, bug fixes, in-app purchases, right? So they want to release some new ability to monetize. So I probably should have said something about this before. A lot of apps are downloaded for free, and people say, how the heck does that make any money, all right? So the latest sort of monetization strategy for a lot of app developers is in-app purchases. So they give away the app for free, and then you can buy things within the app, depending on what the app is. So you might buy, an aluminium baseball bat, that gives you a better hitting on the game, and that costs you 50 cents or 99 cents. And there are companies out there making, all of their revenues out of selling virtual goods in these apps. Or you give you a better gun to shoot your enemy, or whatever the case may be. And people are buying that. I saw an app recently, a fitness app. You download it, you get all sorts of exercise, and then you buy these packs of, abs and whatever else you want, and yoga poses. But people are there, and they're looking at their app saying, oh, that's cool, and I could use that, and they'll just make that purchase. And it's a one-click purchase, and it's tied to your account, or it's tied to your credit card. So so the developers build these apps, and then they add more features, or there are more goods and so on. So they need to be marketed, distributed. You need to update and say, oh, there's now a new laser available for this shoot 'em up game, or whatever the case may be. So that's one of the things that drives a lot of updates for app developer, the updates on the in-app purchases. And then with all of this, if they're promoting to those 27 localized app stores, they've got what's new, and they want that to be localized too, because when you get a notification that you've got a new app, and I think I've got a screenshot for that in a little bit, but when you get a notification that there's new features in this app, you want to be able to read what they are, okay? I blindly update everything. I kind of scan it, but it depends on, the guy might say, I don't want that, or I don't understand what that update is, and so on. So communicating to your customers in their language is important. So these are all contributing to the updates and the overhead on the app developers when it comes to localization from version to version. And here I'll talk about some of the reasons for updates, operating system releases, right? So, they just put out iOS 6, and Apple released the iPhone 5. So a lot of the updates that I'm seeing right now are for, make it compatible with iPhone 5, the bigger screen, or iOS 6 has some new features, or there's new mapping features, so the developers are almost compelled to update that app and get it out there with the updates. A lot of seasonal. A lot of app developers make most of their revenue in the Christmas season, right? People get iPhones for Christmas, or they have an iPhone and they all get iTunes gift cards, right? So they get the iTunes gift card and they want to buy something on Christmas Day or whatever it is. And that's the silly season, I guess, for app developers in terms of sales. It's when they generate a lot of revenue. And so, the US, Thanksgiving is big, Halloween, and Christmas is the big one for app developers. And we have a lot of customers that make, as I say, most of their revenue in Q4 of the year because of this. And one more thing as well, it's kind of a game that some app developers play. There's a rankings refresh. So if you put out an update, and there's a download, you get that hit, you kind of get up the rankings. And as you get up the rankings, then more people see it when they go to purchase, what am I going to buy today? Or what's in the rankings, so they can see the top 25 or so on. So a little bit of a game there in terms of having a strategy of updating your app, getting some new features out there, and then you get the downloads, and then you get that added pop and so on. So lots of reasons for these different updates. And here's a screenshot from my iPad. You can see here, some of it's just standard bugs and features, but a lot of them optimized for iPhone 5, iPhone 5 support for iOS 6. So as Apple releases new versions of the operating system or updates, all the app developers. And these are things here. This is your what's new text. this is the kind of thing, if you've localized that to start, and you need to localize that again, and so, you know, Amazon here would need to translate that one string, right? And you all know, as vendors, if you're asked, hey, I need this in 6 languages, how much is it going to cost, right? And if you do it on a word count, it's pretty small. So it's one of the things that sort of scare app developers in terms of their maintenance going forward, and that's kind of what I'm going to talk a little bit about, is how to make a business out of that and how to handle those updates. Again, here, updates on my phone, iOS 6, some bug fixes there in Google Play Book. So lots of reasons for getting these updates. So having said all of this, what have we seen? What do app developers want when it comes to localization? Well, they want to purchase now. Like I said already, they're sitting in front of their computer. They want to be in control of their whole destiny from within that. They want to get in the browser. They want to get onto a service. They want it, and they want it now. They're not that interested in getting on the phone. They're not interested in working with an account manager. They're not interested in working with a project manager. They want it all from within their environment. They want fast turnaround. Okay? Some guys don't understand localization, and they think that everything can be done in a day. Right? And in some respects, they have a valid point, right? If they've only got 500 words of an app description and another 400 words in the UI, you know, why should it take a week to get this done, right? So some of their expectations are valid, some of them are not. And they want sort of visibility into the localization process. They want to know what's going on. They want to understand, you know, why am I being charged this amount? You know, what happened with leveraging? So like I say, they want to be in control of their environment, so they kind of want to understand what it is you're doing and what you're charging them for. And they just want an efficient service, right? A lot of businesses have grown up now around the app development ecosystem in terms of making it easy for them, whether it's, you know, cloud-based hosting services or localization services or analytics for their apps or whatever that helps them, you know, drive their business, drive their downloads. They want all of this, and they want it now, and they want dashboards, and they want to be able to see this, and they want to be able to get updates, and they want that, as I say, in an efficient service that's delivered to them. And really, at the end of the day, they want content management for the localized assets. So they know that they put some blood and sweat into the iOS app, and then they've taken a lot of the content from that into the Android app. They know there's a lot of commonality. They don't want to double pay. And so they really do want content management across their localized assets and across their apps. So if they have the same app on 3 different platforms, they want to know, you know, where's leveraging, where's my savings, and across platforms too. So it's not just multiple versions of apps on one platform, it's across multiple platforms. So why did they want all of this? Well, it really is the frequency of the app updates. They don't want to think that every time they've got to do an update, I'm into a 1-week cycle, right? Or I'm into a phone call and a quote and a sign-off and a contract, and they really just want this to be, as I said, instantaneous. And they have short development cycles, okay? Apps need to be updated, bugs need to be addressed, and you know, we have customers, and an approach for a lot of app developers is get that app out there early. It might not be perfect, right? But get it out there early, and let's get the feedback. And then we want to respond to that feedback very quickly. So rather than spend a year developing something, I'm wondering if they've got a hit. Put something out there quickly, and then they can iterate very quickly. And once they've been through the initial approval process with Apple, you know, the updates come pretty frequently. And Apple, if it's bug fixes and an enhanced feature, of course Apple loves that. That's going to drive more downloads, and it's going to drive more demand for iPhones. So these short development cycles mean that they want a fast turnaround and an efficient localization service. And they really just want to be in control, right? They want to know what they're doing. I just paid for this, and I expect this to come back in a day, and I'll do the same thing next week, and it's not going to take me 3 hours to get everything ready and upload and download from vendor side or whatever. And they want to be in control of the process as much as possible. And I've talked about this already, leveraging of translations. They want to understand that whole content management and how it's being used across different apps and different platforms. You know, here's a slide I think that should be pretty familiar to everyone in the room. So if we take like traditional localization, right? We have, it grew up around the Adobes and the Googles and the Microsofts of the world, the large software publishers who built software. It was on an 18-month cycle or a 1-year cycle, or maybe now it's down to a 9-month cycle. Back in the day, there were boxes, there was printing. You know what I'm talking about. There was account management as well. There was billing, there was quality. So there was, you know, the whole support system here within this red building, if you like, of the localization service provider. And then out here you had the people who were working on those particular tasks, the translator being probably the one that was doing the lion's share of the work, but graphic artists, if you had graphic assets that need to be localized, or audiovisual engineers. And really, what we discovered early on at Tethras is that this doesn't really work for the app developer, for the person that I've just been describing and the profile of the person that I've been describing. Small guy, he doesn't want to talk with 2 or 3 different people. He doesn't want to have to sign contracts. He doesn't want to do blanket purchase orders. And, at some level over here, somebody in account management or sales goes, well, what's my commission on a, $1,200 sale, right? Why do I want to talk to this guy over here? I've got a $30 million client over here that I'm trying to make sure I have enough project management and localization people to get the job done. So it kind of doesn't fit, right? And so, what have we done and what have we seen that needed to change, if you like, from that model that I just showed you to make this a viable business and provide localization services to app developers and have app developers be happy that they're getting a good service that's efficient and cost effective. So, we sat down and said localization engineering must be automated, right? And I know localization engineering can have lots of connotations to different people, but essentially, the files that need to be translated from that SDK, I don't want to have to download it, give it to an engineering department, process it, and get it into some markup that I can use in my translation system with the translators. So we automated that and moved that to the cloud. Quoting must be instantaneous, right? App developers don't want to hear, I'll get back to you tomorrow with a quote, right? If that's the case, a lot of these guys are going to say, I'm just doing localization right now. I got a feature I can build in a day, and I'll do this later, right? I mean, that's really how they think. They're that. It's not fickle. It's just what's going to give me the most bang for the buck. What's going to give me the most revenue when I release this product? So they want this. They want that quote now, and they want to know what they need to pay for, and can I purchase it right now? Project management must be invisible, right? I don't mean get rid of project managers, but they kind of don't want that human interaction, if you like, right? They want that person at the other end of an email or whatever, but like, I don't need to know that I've got someone taking care of this. I just want it done, right? And so I'll talk a little bit about this and what we've done in terms of moving that to a more automated workflow to meet the needs of our customers. Translators must be accessible. Really what I should be saying there is that translators should be available as soon as I've made the purchase, right? If I upload my files and I get a quote from you and everything looks fine, that should get to the translators as soon as possible. I shouldn't have to wait for an engineering department or a project manager to assign that or send that work out, right? These are small jobs, right? You can't spend that amount of time. For a 500,000 word project, you've got to do that. But for a 500 word project, you can't have humans really handling all of this and hand-holding these small jobs through the system. And that's why people have asked me, is this viable? Can I get into this? But that's why I don't believe that app localization and what app developers need kind of fits with the current model. Developers expect turnaround times in hours and not days, right? So that's realistic at times, it's unrealistic at others, right? I mean, we've done jobs for guys in a few hours. It just happens the translators are online. There were no issues with the content that was uploaded, but generally it takes a few days. But you can't have, project management only works from this time to this time in whatever time zone, and they're going to take care of this and they're going to deliver it back the next day. It doesn't quite work for these guys, especially with the size of the updates. And maintenance must be easy, right? The guy shouldn't have to, the first time that these app developers come to us, it's localization is new to them, it's learning, right? It doesn't happen in 2 days, it might happen in a week because we give them feedback, they've got to do some work. But their big fear is, wow, I just did all that work. Now what happens when I do an update in a month's time? Am I going to have to go through all that stuff again, right? And they don't want to do that. They just want to know that I can throw this stuff at you. I have visibility into what I've thrown at you. You tell me more than I know myself, right? Because we get app developers who have gone through loops to figure out what they change from one version to the next and give us that. And I say, well, we've built a system that does that for you. So, you know, that's our sort of business model, is make it easy for the guy that all he has to do is press the button, purchase, and we will deliver the translations back to him. And they want sort of full visibility into and across projects, right? So every project or every app shouldn't be different. You know, whether it's handled by a different project manager or not, they want to see that sort of dashboard. They want to see what happened, what was leveraged from one version to the next, and, you know, get that feedback. And they love to think, I saved something. I did the Android version, but it only cost me a percentage of the iOS version because there was all these common strings in here. They want to see that, and they want to know that. So basically, this is a little bit washed out, but this is what we've done with our offering, is we've built a lot of these functions into a cloud-based service so that we don't have to employ people. So we can have a scalable business. We don't have to employ people to do all of this billing, translation management, and so on. And this is kind of key to being able to provide localization services to app developers at a price point that works for them, and for us to have a business that's scalable. And I'll talk a little bit about some of these functions now. So localization engineering, you know, we basically just support all the different file formats. So if a developer uploads a file format to us, we parse it, no human involved, and we tell them how many words are in there. And so that's instantaneous. So he sees that we understand his file, and we've built that in the cloud. So it's not an engineer who's created a script or writing a piece of code or whatever to do this. It's all automated and online. We automatically count the words for these different files. We tell them exactly what it is being translated, and we do placeholder protection. So again, all this sort of classic localization engineering, so that when you put it into the hands of a translator, they don't break things like formats or XML tags or so on. So we've taken care of that. So this here is like, if you go onto our site today, this here is if I uploaded these two files, app description.txt and localizable.strings. Localizable.strings is a key value pair file from an iOS application. App description is what you would see if I went to the App Store and saw the description for that text file and strings. And we have identified 183 words in the app description text and 2,211 words in the localizable.strings. All we've done at this stage is said, we know what's in your files, right? There's no leveraging going on. There's no pricing. He hasn't picked any languages. There's nothing yet, but it does tie in, and I'll get to that in a couple of slides. And so quoting, we have instant quotes on our site, and customers can then go and pick the level of translation that we want. So we offer 4 different levels of translation. But again, putting the control into the developers. It's not a salesperson on the phone telling them, hey, I think you should do this, or we highly recommend this. It's there for them to make that choice. We provide 4 levels. So we have native speakers on our network of translators that are not professional translators. So it's not their primary job. So that could be a student, it could be an iPhone enthusiast, and those people get paid a lower rate than our professional translators. But some app developers can decide that's good enough for my app. So it's not a lower level of quality. And in fact, some of the basic translators can be as good as professional translators, because if they're diehard iPhone users and they understand that game genre or whatever, then they're probably going to provide as good a translation as a professional translator. So our next level is professional level. So we send it out to our network of professional translators, and they deliver it back, we deliver it to the customer. Our next level above that is ultra level translation, which is too professional. So we call it ultra, it's a review. So you want 2 sets of eyes, we'll do 1 set of translation, and then we'll do a review on that. And our 4th level then is specialists. So we have some medical apps that we do. So we've had to go out and get medical professionals to do that. So we allow I don't have any UI to show you that, but if you jump onto our site, or I can give you a demo afterwards, we allow the developer to pick the level of translation that they want. So here, I've just chosen Figs, Japanese, and Korean. And if I hit the add to cart, I've now got an instant quote for all of these languages here. It takes a second or 2. If there were previous translations done in French, let's say I did French last month, I hadn't done the other languages, I'd see this at like, maybe $20 if there are new strings. So the leveraging happens from our translation memory in the back end. And then we further have a calculate leveraging discount up here, so you can go out across all your apps in your organization and leverage translations from those apps into this particular app, further reducing the price. So again, we promote that as consistency across your apps. as much as, hey, we'll find a string over here and we'll jam it in here. It's more keeping things consistent. And then we have levels of, you know, noun, verb, or whatever for that particular. So we don't leverage a translation for a label into the translation for a button and so on. Context. Okay, so this is really important and very important for apps, and the size of the apps and the size of the screens and the devices. Context is really key, and character lengths and so on. I'll talk a little bit about that. So one of the things that we have done within our platform is that if there are developer comments within the file itself, we extract those developer comments and make that available to the translator at translation time. I think there's only really one format that supports that, and it's localizable.strings on iOS. So part of how that's all set up in the SDK, a developer can put a comment in there. So we extract that out, and I'll show it to you in a second. Character length restrictions. So we also provide the ability for a developer or one of our project managers, or maybe after the fact when we've run into issues translating into a particular language, that you can set a character restriction on a string and say, you cannot submit a translation longer than this, okay? Then that triggers all sorts of things like, okay, I'll change the meaning of this, or I'll have to come up with something else. But the point is that if the developer tells us there's no way that there can be any more characters than this, we'll restrict it and don't let the translators translate that. Screenshots, we allow developers to upload screenshots of their apps as part of context for the translators. And also we have a discussions module. I'll talk about it a little bit more detail in a couple of slides, where on any string at any time, a translator can start a discussion as to what does this mean, I need more information. A developer can respond, and a project manager can also get involved in that. So we keep the communication tight within the whole platform and environment, so there's not spreadsheets flying around or emails flying around, or, you know, forgotten emails across different projects and across languages. And all of these responses are shared across all translators, and I'll show you some of the UI for that. So this here is the localizable.strings file that we looked at, and this is in our view. And you can see here there's comments that have been put in by the developer. You know, this is a HTML strings for instructions and reader. It may or may not be of any use to the translator. He may think he's done a good job, but the point is we've extracted this out. So in the translator dashboard, they see all of these comments. Yeah. So in this particular case, this book error is actually in the source file that needs to be translated that he uploaded to our site. So we extracted that out of the file and made it available as a comment. If I handed the native file to the translator, they will see it as a comment, right? But we've sort of obfuscated the whole structure of the file from the translator and presented it in a view like this. So to illustrate that even more, so next slide. Here.
This could be really, I mean, this is a really smart way of doing it, because these comments here could be very valuable for the translator.
Yes. So, as I say, Xcode for developing iOS and Macintosh OS apps has a macro within the source files that externalizes the string for translation. And one of the fields in that macro is the developer comment. So Apple built this in. So if a developer is using that macro, he either leaves it blank, where by default then the system says no comment provided by the engineer, right? Or there is a comment. So here he's made a decision that I don't think I need to put a comment in here. So by default the system says no comment. Whereas here he says comic download error. Access to the request was denied, okay? So over time they will get better at what needs to be commented and not commented. Okay, what I'm showing here right now is within our UI, this about is a button, and we're about to set the character restriction here to 10. So that would probably come about because we've just delivered a language and it's too long, and now we said, I can't change my UI. And so we can set the restriction to 10, meaning that in every language, that button cannot be translated into more than 10 characters. And then, in addition, okay, to what the developer put in the source file, we allow the developer or a project manager to come in and add additional comments. So that an email address is required. He has a developer comment in there that says feedback from validation, right? Really doesn't mean anything. Here, as a developer, he's saying, please make sure that email is localized appropriately in each language. I mean, I just made that up for the purposes of the demo. But within our system, he can add metadata to the string And that metadata is shared with all the translators.
Excuse me, who did you say is writing there?
The developer. Within our system. So he's adding metadata on top of what he could easily have gone back out to his source file, added that comment and reloaded it. I'm just for illustrative purposes, I'm saying that anybody at any time involved in the project can come in and add that comment.
You can also, as a
yes.
PM or whatever, you can also
exactly.
Exactly. Send back to the developer.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Now, this box here lives then as metadata within our system. We don't write it back into a source file. So we never kind of want, the only thing we want to give back to the developer are the translated files. And we don't kind of want to tell him he has to, if he has to fix something, he has to fix something. Okay, so touching on the project management piece, we've built this online dashboard for all jobs. So this is getting internal to us. We like to say no spreadsheets, no emails, right? We do send emails, right? But for a lot of the communication, and I'll get to this in a couple of slides, we've built that into our platform. So it's all controlled within the platform. So as I say, it's not an email that got lost in somebody's inbox or a spreadsheet that was created by a language manager and then distributed around or so on. We've built everything right into the platform. And as I say, everything is in the cloud. This is just a quick look at our dashboard. So these are just projects that come in. Our project manager internally, whether it's assigned or not, when it was started. We do some engineering and source tests. So we'll actually look through files and make sure that they're localizable before they go out for translation. And then the status and so on. So again, this is kind of a view into our back end of how we manage the multiple customers that we have. It's not one-on-one interaction is coming to a dashboard, and this is sort of grand central for us in terms of how we have a scalable business and how we can handle all these projects for our customers. And we do translator management in the cloud as well. We've got an extensive sign-up process. We review translators. I'm just racing through this very quickly because I'm running out of time and there's a few things I want to show you. This here is kind of a bug, but there was a sample app that I uploaded that we were looking at a while ago, and once it's been, end reviewed and source reviewed, then we can assign this out for translation. I'll show that to you very quickly. And so this is a sort of a internal page again, where now for this particular Spanish job, we can automatically assign to translators at the right rating, at the right level or payment. And then we put that price out at whatever price we decide, and that goes out to our network, and then people take those jobs from our network. So that's how we manage the translators. We're not blasting out, the system will blast out an email and say, hey, there's a job available, and whoever takes it gets it first, and so on. So this is how we manage our translator network. Sorry to be racing through, but I realize I got 5 minutes left and I want to show you a couple of more things. So discussions. We all have lived in this. Questions, bugs, issues. Translator doesn't know what this means, right? Some translators will just translate it and give it back, right, and hope it's okay. The more conscientious will say, what is this? What does it mean? If they don't get answers and don't get answers quickly, they're never going to ask another question again. They're just going to keep translating, right? It's the nature of the beast. And so we have all project communications managed within our cloud. Our developers, I'm missing a little end to that, but our developers can use an iPhone or an iPad app to receive notifications that they have a question that needs to be answered. So if you go back to the fact that a guy is sitting in a cafe coding, right, and we have a little app that it'll pop up and say, hey, French translator just asked this question, he can answer it there within the app and not have to kind of get out of his development environment. And so I'll show you a screenshot of that. Developers will answer these questions via an iMessage type interface. And it's really about anywhere, anytime, right? So he doesn't have to be online, he doesn't have to be logged in, he doesn't have to go to his email. We want him to respond to the queries, because I said he's on a fast turnaround time, and if he wants quality from us and our translator asks a question, we need a response as quickly as possible from him. And this is sort of the discussions view in our browser. Here's a string that says track in background, right? And the project manager from Tethras said, please clarify what this is. And the developer comes back and says, the app runs in the background when closed, it tracks your GPS location. And says, okay, I will tell the translators. This is a conversation between a project manager at Tethras, pre-sending it out for translation. And again, it's kind of contrived, but just you get the idea that there's a communication back and forth. And now what happens on the developer side, he would have seen something like this in our iPhone app. Here are all the discussions that are going on for a particular project. And here he's been told it's a source string from the Project Viking. He knows what that is. Please clarify what this means. And here's where the guy actually just entered his answer and sent it back. So that was just two different views into the same discussion. But again, the developers, this is not released yet, by the way, but we have it in beta test, and developers love this because they're building mobile apps. They use mobile devices. And that's one of the things about discussions as well is, you know, we've all had this different translators at different times asking more or less the same question. So we've tried to get rid of that by, as soon as the first translator to raise the query, that question becomes part of that object in everybody else's view. And so they know, oh, the question's been asked, hopefully it's been answered. So we don't get the same questions twice, right? And you know, we've solved that. The industry solved that problem with translation managers who kind of collate everything and make sure that I'm only asking one set of questions to the developer, usually done in a spreadsheet, and then I get all the answers and it comes back. And so that's what we've really tried to address here. Okay, this is sort of, you know, preaching to the choir a little bit, but this is like the opportunity for the app developers. I mean, 80% of the apps today on the App Store are in English only. And over 60% of the iOS devices out there are owned by non-native English speakers. Doesn't necessarily mean they don't speak English or they can't get by with English, but this is the sales data from Apple as of the last few months. I'm not sure the wording is quite right here, but really, you know, what the localization service needs to save the developer time and effort, not create time and effort from him to do it. I'm not really talking here about the overall cost that he pays to get something localized. But if the process of localizing his app is going to cost him many hours of his time, it's a lost leader for him. Because app developers, the most important asset they have is their own time and ability. So this is very important, and this is what we've tried to address, is that we save them time and effort. And the money is more or less the same as if they went to any other vendor. 3 million app publishers today. I mean, this is a collation across everything from iOS to Android to Flash to you name it, right? And you know, by 2015, I think these numbers come from Gartner, you expect to be like 5 million app publishers in the world across all the different devices and platforms. Just some quick data here about the app download market and how it's grown. 2009, you know, 2/3 of this was English speaking. In 2011, it went up to about almost half, and it's predicted by 2015 that, you know, 64% of the app download market is going to be in non-English speaking countries of the world. And this, it really is a mobile app gold rush, right? There's no doubt about that. There's a lot of money out there and a lot of people clamoring after that and clamoring for the downloads and the sales and the advertising revenue and so on. And this is why we're in this business and why we're trying to address this for our customers.
How do you market your services to such a dispersed group of
very good question. And it's a difficult one because, you know, app developers go to meetups, right? That's where you meet them. You've got to build a service that's cool that they'll start talking about. So these guys, you know, hunt in packs, right? They're all online, they're all on Twitter, they all follow each other. And they're all looking at cool new ways, or what came out in the latest SDK release from Apple, and somebody's figured that out, and they talk about it. So there are certain people that they all follow. I know that's not a great marketing strategy, but that's really what it is. I mean, it's a grassroots type of organization. So you got to get out there with your service, your tools. That's why we've done what we've done. We've built these apps. So we'll be the only one out there that has an app that, you know, notifies them when translators have questions, and they'll go, wow, that's cool. That's really cool. I'll use that. So you know, you've got to impress them with technology. It's not necessarily about price. It's about technology. It's about, you know, everything I've talked about here. Do you fit into their mindset? Are you thinking like them? Are you providing a service that they think is cool and works for them? So, and we do limited AdWords, and there are certain, you know, blogs, if you like, or technical publications out there that you can advertise on, where a lot of these guys are looking for answers all the time. Name is slipping my head right now, but what's the one where all the questions are asked, Brian? I can't remember, but okay. Anyway, I'm almost done. So basically, to summarize very quickly everything I said, app localization, we believe, needs to be affordable, not just at the price point, but in terms of the developer's time and effort that he has to put in to localize his apps. And it needs to be accessible, and really that's a catch-all for everything. It needs to be efficient, easy to use, easy to understand, and sort of that always on, on demand, online. That's what these guys are expecting. With that, I thank you for listening.